Hello everyone. Welcome to Peaceful Soul, the place where we talk about how to live calm, strong, and fulfilled, even when you're living on your own. You know, a lot of people think living alone automatically means being lonely, empty, and boring, but that's not always the case. The real problem only shows up when you let life drift by without intention, without anything to look forward to. And that's the very first key. Always have something that excites you. A reason to get out of bed in the morning, and a little joy to move toward. I think of someone I know named George, who's now 71. When he first retired, he fell into a slump. His mornings felt heavy because there was no job to get up for. No meetings on the calendar. No one expecting him anywhere. He told me there were days he just sat by the window, watching time slip away without meaning. But then George made a choice. Instead of letting life drag him along, he decided to give himself something to anticipate. Once a week, he would try a new dish at a different restaurant in town. It sounds simple, but the impact was huge. Suddenly, George found himself looking forward to the weekend, imagining what flavors and experiences he might discover. Over time, he even started a little food journal that he shared with friends. That small change gave him back a sense of color and excitement. Even though he was living alone, science backs this up too. Research shows that simply having something to look forward to triggers the release of dopamine, a neurotransmitter that boosts happiness and motivation. A study from Cornell University found that the joy people get from planning a trip can actually last for weeks before the trip even happens. In other words, some of the greatest happiness comes not from the event itself, but from the anticipation leading up to it. I've experienced this in my own life as well. There have been weeks where the thing I looked forward to most was buying a few new skeins of yarn for my knitting hobby. It sounds tiny, but that excitement changed the way my whole week felt. Other times, my joy came from something as simple as a weekend morning walk in the park, hoping to spot a few migrating songbirds. These little rewards kept me feeling like life always had something fresh waiting ahead. And I believe anyone, whether living alone or with others, can find joys like this. The key is to schedule it. Don't wait for joy to show up on its own. Put it on your calendar, circle it, and treat it like an important appointment with yourself. Not only does this help you organize your life better, but it also creates a kind of mental anchor, a reminder that the future holds something worth looking forward to. So if you're living alone, ask yourself, what do you have to look forward to this week? Maybe it's coffee with an old friend, a new movie you can't wait to watch, or even trying out that recipe you saved on your phone. The size doesn't matter, the meaning does. Because these little moments of anticipation are what keep your spirit warm and remind you that life on your own isn't dull at all. In fact, it can be an exciting and deeply rewarding journey. When you live alone, the easiest trap to fall into is letting yourself go. There's no one reminding you to take a walk, no one asking what's for dinner, no one nudging you to tidy up the living room. That's why building steady routines and holding yourself accountable becomes the foundation that keeps life from sliding downhill. I remember talking to a friend of mine named Mark. After his divorce, he said that at first, living alone felt incredibly freeing. But just a few months later, his apartment was a mess. His sleep schedule was all over the place, and his mental health was noticeably declining. Mark admitted that the freedom he once enjoyed had quickly turned into a spiral of chaos. And the only thing that pulled him back was rebuilding a daily routine. Now, a routine doesn't have to be complicated or overly structured. It can be as simple as waking up at the same time every day, spending 20 minutes cleaning up your space, or cooking yourself a real meal instead of surviving on fast food. Behavioral psychology research shows that repeating organized actions helps the brain reduce uncertainty and creates a sense of inner safety. That stability becomes the platform where real self-control can grow. I'll admit, I'm not always great at discipline myself. There have been times when I stayed up way too late working, ignored the mess around me, and ended up feeling drained and unmotivated. But I discovered a little trick that actually works: using a timer. When I get home, I set it for 20 minutes and just go, cleaning dishes, tidying up, or putting things back in order. It may sound small, but it gives me control over my space and reminds me that I'm in charge, not the pile of chores waiting in the corner. Another example comes from Linda, a retired friend of mine. When she was still working, her days had structure. She had to get up early and leave for the office. But after retirement, she realized her days started to blur together. Linda told me there was a stretch when she slept until noon, skipped breakfast, and felt sluggish and gloomy. Eventually, she created what she called a fake work schedule for herself. Wake up at 7. Take a walk at 8. Spend an hour reading or gardening by 10. That simple framework gave her a sense of purpose every day, and her health improved dramatically. The truth is, we can't wait for other people to manage our lives. When you're living alone, you're the only one responsible for the quality of your life. But that responsibility isn't a burden, it's a form of mature freedom. You have the freedom to choose how to live, and at the same time, the discipline to protect yourself. Routines and responsibility are the sturdy frame that turns living alone from isolation into a healthy and sustainable way of life. One of the biggest risks of living alone is slipping into what I call the shell mode. Your home might feel like a safe and cozy retreat, but if day after day you never step outside those four walls, isolation slowly begins to eat away at your spirit. Research from Brigham Young University once revealed that long-term loneliness can have the same negative impact on your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That tells us something important. Leaving the house and engaging with the outside world isn't just a social activity. It's a biological necessity for long-term health. I remember a friend of mine named Kevin. After moving to a new city, he spent nearly 3 months almost entirely inside his apartment. At first, it felt fine. He had the internet, movies, food delivery, everything he needed, but soon the exhaustion, anxiety, and sleepless nights crept in. When Kevin finally decided to join a local running club at the nearby park, everything started to change. Just a few simple conversations with new people made him feel connected again. Kevin admitted he never realized that even a small, "good morning" from someone could lift his mood so quickly. And the truth is, going out doesn't need to mean doing something big or complicated. Sometimes it's as simple as sitting in a cafe, reading at the library, or taking a walk around the block. I personally had a memorable experience one morning while waiting for a friend at a coffee shop. Out of nowhere, someone recognized me from this channel. His name was Jim, and he was sitting with a couple of friends. He asked, "Hey, don't you have a YouTube channel?" We ended up chatting for a while, and it made that entire day feel special. I realized that if I had stayed home instead, I would have missed a meaningful human connection that brightened my week. Science backs this up too. Even brief social interactions can stimulate the brain to release oxytocin, a hormone tied to trust and happiness. A Harvard study that's been running for more than 75 years found that quality relationships, not necessarily the number of them, are the single biggest predictor of happiness and longevity. That means you don't need a huge social circle. A handful of genuine connections or even small, everyday interactions can dramatically improve both mental and physical health. Another example is my friend Donna, a woman in her 60s who makes it a point to visit the farmer's market every weekend. She doesn't buy much, just a few vegetables or fruits, but what she loves most is chatting with the vendors and seeing familiar faces. Donna told me those seemingly simple moments remind her that she's seen, that she belongs to a community. The lesson I've learned is this: living alone does not mean living in isolation. The world outside is always open to us. All it takes is stepping through the door, and suddenly opportunities to connect and discover are waiting. You never know who you'll meet, what you'll learn, or what small joy you'll stumble upon. Getting out is a way of reminding yourself that you are not alone, that life is still moving forward, and you always have the chance to be part of its flow. One of the hardest challenges of living alone is facing yourself. It's easy to say, "I'm fine," or "I love the quiet," as a way to cover up what we're really feeling inside. But the truth is, every one of us needs connection and understanding. If you keep pretending you don't, sooner or later that emptiness grows louder. The most important step is being honest with yourself, admitting when you feel lonely, restless, or drained by the lack of closeness. And here's the thing: that honesty isn't weakness. It's the first, crucial step toward protecting your mental health. I think about my old colleague Rachel. After her kids grew up and moved out, she lived alone in a small apartment. To everyone around her, she would say she was perfectly fine, even enjoying the freedom. But one day, In a private conversation, she admitted that the long stretches of silence at night sometimes felt suffocating. Instead of denying it, Rachel chose to face her feelings. She started journaling to release her thoughts, called her friends more often, and joined a local art class. By being honest with herself, she not only improved her mood but also rediscovered joy and creativity. Psychology research backs this up. Studies show that labeling your emotions, naming what you're truly feeling, like sadness, loneliness, or anxiety, actually lowers stress in the brain. A famous UCLA study found that when people acknowledge and accept their emotions instead of denying them, activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain tied to fear and anxiety, decreases, helping us stay calmer and clearer. In other words, being honest about your emotions works like a natural sedative for the mind. Another story comes from Tom, a man in his 40s I met at a community meditation group. Tom shared that after losing his mother, he went through a deep crisis. Outwardly, he kept showing up to work and talking to people like everything was fine. But inside, he was exhausted and falling apart. When he finally admitted to himself that he was grieving and needed support, that was when his healing truly began. He sought therapy and joined a grief support group. Tom told me that simply having a space where he could be honest and listen to lifted a huge weight off his chest. We live in a society that often pushes the idea of being strong at all costs. But in reality, true strength comes from the courage to be honest with yourself. If you're lonely, admit it. If you need connection, seek it out. Living alone doesn't mean you cut off your emotional needs. It means learning to recognize and care for them in ways that work for you. When we're honest about our emotional needs, we create a healthier single life, one where quiet doesn't turn into isolation, and freedom doesn't turn into emptiness. That kind of honesty isn't just a gift to yourself. It's the foundation for building deeper, more authentic relationships when you choose to connect with others. One of the most powerful ways to make single life truly fulfilling is to learn how to nurture joy from the little things. We often think happiness only comes from big events, a long vacation, a major career achievement, or an expensive gift. But the truth is, lasting happiness usually grows out of simple, everyday moments and the small things we look forward to. Having something on the horizon, even if it's just a minor activity, can create a surprisingly strong boost for your spirit. I remember a story about Olivia, a friend who spent several years living on her own after relocating for work. Olivia told me that every week, she made sure to schedule a little event for herself to look forward to. It might be trying a new coffee shop, buying a newly released book, or simply taking a walk in the park to see the flowers bloom. Those seemingly small rituals became the fuel that carried her through busy work weeks. She said it was the anticipation itself that made her feel alive, rather than just existing. Science supports this idea. A study from Cornell University showed that people tend to feel happier when anticipating an experience than when waiting for a material possession. Experiences, no matter how small, trigger the brain to release dopamine, the chemical tied to excitement and motivation. That's why knowing you're going to see a movie you've been waiting for, or try out a new recipe this weekend, can lift your mood for days in advance. I practice this principle myself. On especially hectic weeks, I'll set a small goal like, this Saturday I'm going to the beach for a lobster roll. It may sound ordinary, but the entire week I was excited just thinking about that moment. And when it finally came, the joy felt twice as sweet because I had been savoring the anticipation. That blend of looking forward to something and then experiencing it, anticipation and fulfillment, creates a powerful happiness effect. Another example comes from George, a retired gentleman I met at a book club. Instead of letting old age drift by in monotony, George gave himself small joys every week, visiting the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, taking cooking classes, or simply sitting on his porch listening to the birds. He told me those little pleasures gave his life color and, more importantly, gave him a reason to get up in the morning. The core lesson here is simple. We don't need to wait for big milestones to feel happiness. Focus on small moments, little plans, and let them be your source of motivation. Knowing that you're going to try a new dish this weekend, catch up with a friend, or finally finish that painting you've been working on makes each day feel more meaningful. And when you live alone, This principle becomes even more important. If you don't create things to look forward to, it's easy to slip into boredom or feelings of emptiness. But with just a bit of intention, life can feel richer and more memorable. True joy doesn't depend on the scale of the experience, it depends on how much you choose to treasure and anticipate it. One of the greatest gifts of living alone is freedom. You can eat dinner at 9 p.m. without asking anyone, blast your favorite music all day long, or decorate your home exactly the way you want. That freedom is something many people dream of, but it also comes with responsibility. The responsibility to take care of yourself. Without it, freedom can quickly turn into neglect, and the result is a decline in both physical and mental health. I remember my friend Nathan once told me that living alone was the most liberating period of his life. He didn't worry about schedules, meals, or chores, but after just a few months, he realized his weight had climbed, his sleep was a mess, and his apartment had gotten so cluttered that he felt embarrassed to invite anyone over. Nathan admitted that he once believed, freedom means doing whatever I want, but later discovered that true freedom means being able to manage my own life. That's when he started learning how to balance enjoyment with self-care. Science backs this up. A study from the University of Michigan found that people who lived alone but maintained healthy routines, such as balanced meals, light exercise, and consistent sleep, showed much lower rates of depression than those living alone without healthy habits. This proves that freedom and discipline cannot be separated. When you know how to manage yourself, that's when you unlock the real value of independence. I've gone through this myself. For a while, I let freedom carry me away, eating at odd hours, working too late, convincing myself I'm doing this because I feel like it. But the longer it went on, the more drained and unmotivated I became. It wasn't until I reintroduced small habits, going to bed before 11, light exercise in the morning, and cooking meals for myself, that I realized self-care doesn't take away your freedom. In fact, it gives you the energy to enjoy freedom more fully. Another example is Claire, a single woman in her 50s. Claire cherishes her independence, but she also sets rules for herself. A 30-minute walk every day, one healthy meal she cooks herself, and at least an hour for hobbies like painting or listening to music. She says that it's this balance of freedom and discipline that makes her single life both rich and sustainable. Here's the lesson I've learned. Freedom and self-care are not opposites. Instead of thinking, either I enjoy myself or I stay disciplined, think of self-care as the foundation that allows you to enjoy your freedom in the long run. When you're healthy, energized, and clear-minded, you can truly do what you want without being held back by negative consequences. That's what real freedom looks like. After everything we've shared, it's clear that living alone is not a sentence to loneliness. It's a journey you can actively shape into something meaningful. We've talked about maintaining routines to stay balanced, the power of going out and connecting with others, being honest about your emotional needs, finding joy in small moments, and finally, blending freedom with self-care. All of these point to one simple truth: you are the architect of your own life. I know there will be days when it doesn't feel easy, days when your home feels too quiet, when you hesitate to step outside, or when it seems like no one truly understands you. But it's in those moments that honesty with yourself, intentional self-care, and even the smallest connections become the keys to moving forward. Living alone doesn't mean living in isolation. On the contrary, it's a chance to dive deeper into who you are, while building a life you genuinely love. Remember, happiness doesn't always come from big events or luxury experiences. More often, it's in the everyday things. That morning cup of coffee, a short chat at the cafe, a good book, or even the pride of sticking to your workout routine. These little things, when repeated and cherished, lay the foundation for a fulfilling life. A dear friend of mine, Helen, once told me something that stuck. I live alone, but I've never felt lonely, because I know how to be with myself. That one sentence captures the true spirit of a healthy single life, not running from loneliness, but transforming it into space for joy, growth, and genuine connection. So if you're living on your own, ask yourself, what did I do today to take care of myself? To connect with others, or to nurture small joys? The answers don't have to be big, but consistency and intention are what make single life vibrant and meaningful. And before we wrap up today's video, I have one request. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Peaceful Soul, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next episode. Most importantly, share your own experiences of living alone in the comments below, because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Always remember, you are not alone on this journey. Together, we're learning how to transform living alone into a life worth looking forward to and a life full of meaning.